Broadcasting live from Houston, from the space city to the world. You are watching NowMedia Television.
Welcome to Power CEOs, the truth behind the business. I'm Jen Gaudet, your fearless host, entrepreneur, investor, and business coach. I'm here because I believe that iron sharpens iron. And when we bring guests who are successful in business and life to the table, and we share what's working and maybe even something of what's not, what we're able to do is grow our businesses and our lives. What does that mean? That means that we have a ripple effect that impacts not only our lives, our families, but also our teams, our communities, and our world. I'm really excited to have a guest in studio today with me who has been here before. I am really jazzed to welcome back Katrin Becker, fellow entrepreneur and coach. Welcome to the studio, Katrin.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's great to be back.
So we have been talking quite a bit over the last several months about company culture.
Yes.
And we are riding some pretty big waves and challenges in the business world. There's AI, there's the tech and digital revolution of our businesses. There is the economic situation that we've found ourselves in that has been a little bit dicey over the past several months. How does that all impact corporate culture, and what can we do to mitigate some of the fears and the stress associated with all the change?
Well, you know, we think about like COVID being, 2020, and now it's 2023 and we're halfway through, but there's still so many ripple effects that happened from that are now affecting us in today's era, today's business age. I mean, the corporate culture had changed so much during COVID, where people were working from home. There was so much more mixing. People knew that, you know, you had dogs or cats because they were in the background of your video conferences.
Or in the foreground.
Right? You know, walking across the screen, and the kids. And so there was a lot more mixing that happened, but there was still this desire to get back to normal, whatever that normal was. And so as we navigate going back into offices and how that works, there's still that other side, and we still have to address that other side of people that is still both there. So I think there's just kind of, we're still settling in from that COVID experience that we all went through.
And then let's add on, oh, by the way, we've been living in inflation. It's a little bit more expensive at the grocery and with everything in life, really, let's be real. And we now have more digitization happening. We have artificial intelligence being brought in. What's happening at the employee level in our companies when we take the ripple effect of all the things over the last couple of years, and then we introduce financial strain on the personal side and change on the business side?
Fear.
Oh.
The F word. Right?
Wait. We can't say the F word on television.
F-E-A-R. That F word that everyone is feeling right now, because there's the stress for companies themselves of how is business evolving, how are things going. And with corporate culture, I mean, people are the heart and soul of all of it. Whether you have a service, whether you have a product, it all gets made by people and sold to other people. So it's really important that even though there's this fear of what is the economy going to look like in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year from now, there's still the people aspect that are there, and they are still having this effect. I mean, if anyone's gone to the grocery store, they've noticed that their bill is way more expensive than
Just
it
a little
was
bit.
just a year ago. I mean, I just popped in for like 3 things, and it was $85. I was like, wait, what did I buy? Like, this can't possibly be right. And the same thing is happening all across America for everyone. So we really have to think as a corporation, that's the life that everyone's living. That's the reality that we're all there with. But we have to keep important that the people are going to work harder when they feel that they are protected, when there's less fear. So what as a corporation can we do to eliminate and scale back some of the fear that people are already experiencing, and helping them to feel secure in their job and feel like what they're doing matters has a huge impact on morale and how people are going to feel when they're interacting with each other, when they're interacting with customers, when they're interacting with supply chain, wherever it is in the line, they have to interact with others. And being able to bring that in can reduce the fear and the anxiety for everyone.
Well, and you know, it brings to mind something that's very important, and it's our clients are experiencing this. Whether we're business to business or business to consumer is irrelevant. There's people on the other side of the business to business transaction as well. So no matter who we're dealing with, whether it's a fellow entrepreneur, a business partner, whether it's an end user, client, or our employee, everybody's dealing with kind of the same stressors, and we're all dealing with change. So what are some things that are practical that we could be thinking about as entrepreneurs or executives in the company that we say, okay, I have this change coming. I am implementing artificial intelligence to take away some of the admin type tasks in my business right now. That's going to induce fear because all of a sudden the person who's doing the data entry is going to go, well, what happens to my job? Well, the goal is to upskill so that we leverage the tool so they don't have to do the mundane task. But that comes with a lot of preparation, planning, and structure around the communication. So how do we address that? Because they're already in that state of, oh my goodness, you know, things are expensive. I'm in fear. So how are some practical what are some practical steps we could take as the entrepreneur and executive to, you know, reduce that fear and introduce the new technology in a way that is non-threatening?
With any kind of fear, you have to look at it head on, because it's the anxiety of the what if, of the unknown. That's where the fear lives. That's where it comes from. So when you can face it head on and say, okay, what's the likelihood that this would happen? What's the worst outcome that we could actually have from this? It's usually never as big as it is in our head. Right? It's when you're laying in bed as a little kid and there's a noise, and of course you imagine it to be, you know, a monster, and it's just...
Well, you don't have to be a kid for that.
So it still exists. So it's looking at it head on and really evaluating it in a logical way that's removing the emotion. And it's something that anybody can do, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And if you're so in the emotion that you can't think of it clearly and critically, that's a great time where you reach out to a mentor or some other coworker and you can talk it through with them and get some perspective to say, maybe this really isn't as big of a fear as I think it is.
Oh, well, you know, we've been raised in fear of machines and AI, and now we have AI integrations in our business, and it's the next level of tech. But when we talk to our employees, and the first thing they think of is, oh, Skynet. We're right? Giving all of our power. Like, what happens? Is a Terminator going to come in?
Right.
You know, so we're kind of battling some irrational fears that are created from pop culture.
Sure.
As well as, well, what happens if this task removes off my plate? Do I still have a job? So what does that look like? Give me a good example of walking through that with someone.
So just yesterday, I had a client, and we were working together on she's a solopreneur and is in the process of needing to shift some things in her business. So through the course of the conversation, we talked about, well, what has been working before? Where were you the most satisfied financially? And as she was talking through some of the things, she had done some VA work before COVID and felt like, well, I can't go back to that because of ChatGPT.
Okay.
Right. So it was just a moment of sitting there and like, okay, walk me through that. How is ChatGPT preventing you from being able to do this job? Well, because they don't need me. ChatGPT can do it all. It's like, have you tried ChatGPT? Like, it's only as good as what you put into it. So garbage in, garbage out, but it still needs a human to like enter it. Like, this is just a great tool that you can utilize to even take your business that you were succeeding at before even further. You know, this is the jet fuel that you could need to really relaunch. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, yeah, I guess it didn't really make sense for me to be scared of AI. I was like, no, but it's the unknown. It's not knowing exactly what it does. It's the fear of getting started, the fear of looking stupid, which is a huge one that holds so many people back, especially really smart people. People that have had it easy and hadn't had to like really think about it, the thought of being like, oh, someone's gonna think I don't know something can be really, really detrimental. And we're all human. We're all learning new things. Like, it's about growing and having that curiosity.
Yeah, last time I checked, none of us had access to this over a year ago. So we are all literally, unless we were the developers or the beta testers, we are all in the same boat, and it is rapidly evolving. So, you know, something that's really funny that I heard the other day, and you're so right. People are afraid of what they don't know, and they're afraid to look like they don't know what they don't know. And when I was having a conversation about, you know, it wasn't ChatGPT, but it was another artificial intelligence. And they said something, and it just gave me pause. They said, well, it's going to take over all of our strategic thinking. We're not going to have to think anymore. I said, well, when the calculator came out, does that mean that you need to no longer know math?
Right.
Like, you know, when the computer came out, did it mean that we no longer had to think anymore as human beings? Because this is just the next level of that. You know, when the internet came out, 96% of what's in the internet became, you know, fake or false, or because everybody was putting everything out there and the same thing, garbage in, garbage out. So what makes this new technology any different? You know, and so like it's about taking that step back. You know, when we hit that fear response, if we go to some biased opinion, that taking that step back and going, wait, what other instances of this did we see?
Well, I love to link it back to when autotune came out for music. I mean, you could have been the worst singer, and you speak into that auto-tune and you sound amazing, and it's got all the like techno beats to it, and it's so great. But that doesn't mean you stop singing. Like, it had its moment, it was really big, and now it's used like strategically and more intentionally, and you still have the beautiful voice of the original singer to go through it. So I feel like it's going to be the same thing with ChatGPT, that it got really hot because it's the brand new thing and people were using it for everything, you know, for AI, for all the different places, but it will settle in and it will find its place, and it'll be just like email. You know, it's just, because think about email, how revolutionary that was. Like, I have a boss who remembers when email was introduced in his company, and he was given the option, like, do you want an email account? And he was like, why? Mm-hmm. Why would I do that? We've got the inter-office memo thing, like the manila envelope that you write the name and scratch it out and it gets passed around. He was like, I've got that.
1980s and 90s.
Exactly. So why would I need this? And now to think about someone not having an email, I mean, I've got like 17 of them. Like, you know, they're so become part of it, but it didn't eliminate anything. It's just we change and we grow and we evolve.
Yeah, and so something that's coming really strongly to me through this conversation is there's always trends. Right now, the trend is to use ChatGPT for everything. Well, we know that it's only accurate through, 2021? So using that for research that's up to date isn't exactly a good use case of that technology. So when we look at the trends, and because you work with entrepreneurs as well, we both do, how do we see the trends and sort and sift and decide which of the trends are we going to implement in our businesses, as opposed to which ones are we going to kind of let the dust settle and figure out what's going to happen over there and whether it makes a good sense to play with it?
I think it's going to be so personal to each person, and I think as it's the same with social media. Like, a new social media Threads was just announced, right? And so I had so many people in my social media feed that are social media managers being like, oh my gosh, another thing that I have to manage. And the same thing, you know, with TikTok becoming more, you know, it started out with just teenagers, and then it's really grown, and there's all sorts of different people who are on it speaking their voice. So I think it really is going to depend, like, you can't judge yourself for not taking that step at the time. You take it when it feels right for you. So if you're not into AI right now, it's going to come into your life at some point because it has to, and maybe you'll accept it and maybe you won't. But it's about being certain in yourself of what you're doing and making sure it's the right thing and listening to your inner guidance, like, but not making sure it's not out of fear, if that makes sense. You know, it's playing that field and saying, like, I love that you love this. You go do you, have a great time with it, but I'm gonna stay and working in this way, and just listening to our inner self.
Yeah, and you know, there's another thing that's happening. It's an interesting phenomenon. There's all these companies with all these AIs that do the same thing. You know, and we've seen that. We saw that in the .com era. Well, maybe you're not old enough to remember the .com era, but all of a sudden everything was a .com, and every .com was going to be this huge, amazing, like $100 million exit, and we had a bust because, you know, it was kind of a fad. It was more of a fad. And so right now, AI is a huge trend. It's moving forward. There's no doubt that that is the wave of the future, and that we're going to use machine learning to optimize our business processes. However, all the different things that are coming out, not all of them are going to still be around this time next year. And so how do we be more discerning about which tools, when we decide, say we have a strategic plan, we're like, great, this is going to make, like, we know that this application of machine learning or AI is going to be awesome for our company, for our efficiency, and we want to use it. How do we kind of sort and sift through the garbage?
How do you sort and sift through the garbage? It's going so many different thoughts of what's the best way forward for that. But I really, you kind of stumped me because my brain was going one direction and then you took this curveball question and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. So I think what really comes down to it is,
what works for us and which companies do we, it's due diligence too.
it is due diligence, it's following up with it, but change is essential. You know, the phrase, the only thing constant is change, has been around forever. Everything is constantly moving and constantly changing, and the chaff will fall away. You know, we'll learn which are the things that are rising to the top that have the actual staying power, and it's being ready to make that change when it's time to make it, and being flexible and adaptable and not getting so set in our ways that we are completely putting on blinders and not listening to what needs to happen.
Whoa, hold up. Did you just say be adaptable and flexible?
I did. I know. Groundbreaking, right?
You know, it's really funny because anytime, like, we're talking about trends here. We're talking about fear around novelty and new things happening. We're talking about integrating trends and how to sort and sift. And it boils down to the fundamentals of business once again. Is it aligned with where we're going? Is it going to make us better, faster, more effective, more efficient? Are we going to be adaptable and flexible? Like, it's the key tenets of success in business that keeps coming up no matter what topic we're talking about.
And it's about being open-minded to evaluate it, coming not from a place of fear, but of a place of how can this serve my customers better? You know, how is this going to make me better at serving my customers? And kind of looking at it through that filter, and even evaluating everyone's mission statement and their core values, and running it through that filter. Like, does this align with who I am? Because you have to look at, am I just chasing the next shiny thing, or am I afraid of change? And of course, the place is always in the middle of in between those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, as I think about which technologies I've implemented and integrated in my businesses, I've looked at it from the value lens myself. I've gotten to the point in business, I only invest with people who share my values, and I only do business and partner with businesses that share my values, because what I've learned is it doesn't matter what we're talking about in business. If we don't share values, then we have an intrinsic malalignment, if you will, of where we're going or what's important to us. Ultimately, over time, that's not going to serve us. And I think that the next generation of consumers are really value driven, or at least that's what I'm finding. The younger people are they're purpose driven, they're value driven, and they want it to be in alignment with what they're doing. So we as entrepreneurs kind of have to get on the bandwagon with that. Some of us who are older, you know, as Gen X, you know, and above, you know, we have to adapt with the time, because to get back to culture and to kind of tie this up in a bow, there's trends, there's fads, there's things that are happening, but if we sacrifice our core values and do business with someone that's out of alignment, we could risk the culture of our company, or we could risk some of our core team members.
And it takes a while to get the culture where you want, but it could just be one bad decision to completely ruin it. So as long as you're continuing to align it with values, you should be okay.
Yeah, and so I'm a little bit curious before we go to break, like, as people are evaluating these things and they're thinking about their core values, and they think about the culture as it evolves, what are some things that we can plant, some seeds to plant in our viewers that they can be thinking about on a culture level, maybe a self-assessment of their culture and their values? Are they actually walking their talk? What are some things or some action steps that they could take today to start that evaluation process to make sure that they are doing things in alignment with their plan and their values, their mission?
Because so often we just get in the habit of doing things that we never stop to look back and to evaluate it. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone about the importance of having meetings of value and making sure that they're not time wasters. And this person is now the person setting the meetings. And so to him, they are completely valuable because they're ticking all the boxes of the things that he wanted. So I reversed the question back to him and I was like, well, how do you know it's providing value to the people sitting in the meetings? And he doesn't actually ask.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Assumptions can kill your business.
Absolutely. So the best way is to ask, to have a policy where it's open for people to come in and provide feedback and let them know that their voice can be heard, and being able to speak in a way that can be received by the other person, so that you're communicating in a way that everyone can understand and follow.
So what I'm hearing is a good idea for us to do as self-reflection with our teams is go and ask, hey, is this still serving you? How can I better facilitate you and your growth and your job so that we can make sure that we're moving together powerfully forward and we're meeting everyone's goals.
Right, and if it's the first time you're asking, nobody might say anything. They might be like super quiet, like, oh gosh. So you just keep asking. Keep having this moment where you're asking or noticing what people do, not necessarily what they say or don't say. You know, are there different behaviors where people are finding workarounds to things and noticing like, oh, why are you doing it that way? And that might be a place where you can learn something else that you can adapt and bring into your business to keep the culture the way you want it or to keep it to the next level if there's a direction you want to move towards.
I completely concur with you, and what's really coming very clear is that safe, open line of communication. Our employees and our team members have to feel safe coming to us. Our partners have to feel safe coming to us if they have a question, a concern, or when we look for feedback. So fostering that safe space to have that constructive conversation so that we can move powerfully forward is becoming more and more critical in today's business world.
Yes, and as the business leader, it's important and imperative that we check in and how do we react to bad news? Have we set a precedent that when we get bad news, we fly off the handle, that we yell at people? Because if that's the case, no one's going to come to us with bad news unless they absolutely have to. So it's not fostering.
They're going to push it under the carpet, and it's going to become a really big problem instead of a smaller problem.
Exactly.
I absolutely love it. Unfortunately, we do have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in just a few moments. Stick around.